I think we all know the federal government continues to be the largest single purchaser of opioids in the entire world. In addition to that, the federal government pays for about 60% of all opioid-related hospitalizations. That tells me that Medicare and Medicaid have an obligation to try and remedy the problem that they are frankly paying for. We held a field hearing in Bensalem, Pennsylvania recently, including expert panels from government and outside of government. And one of the major takeaways when we discussed the efforts that Medicare and Medicaid has to reduce opioid overutilization and misuse, one of the major takeaways was that there are far too few Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries who are consuming significant and large dosages of prescription opioids. Far too few of them are being monitored by the program that is meant to monitor overutilization and misuse. A case in point, the Centers for Disease Control establishes guidelines for chronic pain prescribing, and they suggest to avoid or carefully justify dosages over 90 milligrams morphine equivalent dose, MED, 90 milligrams per day. And the CDC says when you are at or above that level, the risks begin to outweigh the evidence of medical benefit. That's the CDC. Well, 1.6 million Medicare beneficiaries met that threshold in 2016. And as I say, Medicare has a tool for dealing with overutilization. It's called the Overutilization Monitoring System. And CMS believes that this tool is effective, but here's the problem. It captures far too few people who meet these criteria. This chart is a depiction of this. The large magenta circle represents the 12.6 Medicare beneficiaries that received an opioid prescription in 2017. Of those 12.6, the green piece of the pizza pie represent the 1.6 million who received a prescription dosage at the level that the CDC says puts you at risk. That's about 12.6% of the larger circle, 1 in 8 Medicare beneficiaries. How many are CMS actually monitoring? Of this amount, a tiny, tiny slice, 44,332, fewer than 3% of the people that CDC believes are at risk are actually being monitored. Now, at the hearing, we discussed one specific beneficiary population that really seems like a no-brainer to include in this monitoring, and that is those people who have already suffered an opioid-related overdose. It happens to be, not surprisingly really, one of the most significant predictors of a future overdose is someone who has had one previously. And yet, individuals who have already suffered a non-fatal overdose continue to receive opioid prescriptions funded by Medicare and Medicaid, known to Medicare and Medicaid, including at high doses, and these programs have no systemic effort to even monitor this consumption. No method for even informing their physician, the prescribing physician, that this person earlier had an overdose. So my amendment, Mr. Chairman, would simply use the existing tools within Medicare and Medicaid to try to encourage a monitoring, a more appropriate prescribing for this vulnerable population. For Medicare, it would require CMS to first identify beneficiaries who have overdosed and then include them in this overutilization monitoring system. That means telling the plan that they participate in that there has been an overdose, making sure the beneficiary is notified and provided every opportunity to appeal, alert prescribers so that the doctors who are prescribing opioids know that this person had an overdose in the past, and a plan must enroll the beneficiary in case management. Now, for the vast majority of individuals, that's it. Those items that I just went through would be the sole consequence. But for a small percentage, a plan could take a further step and have a beneficiary-specific point-of-sale safety edit. In other words, the plan could work out a threshold above which a person cannot automatically get their prescription filled. It would be stopped at the pharmacy. The physician could override that, but at least there would be a check on this vulnerable population. And finally, only if none of those measures worked, then the plan would have the ability to adopt a policy that we passed by a voice vote in CARA in 2016, and that is the lock-in provision that says under those circumstances, a person would be required to get their prescription from a single provider and a single pharmacy. That is a tiny, tiny percentage of these people, but I think we're doing a great disservice to knowingly continue to provide sometimes very large quantities of opioids to people who clearly are at substantial risk. The lock-in amendment, I appreciate the work with Senator Brown, Senator Kaine, and Senator Portman a couple of years ago when we got that adopted. It was adopted by voice vote. For Medicaid, a similar approach, we would ask states to identify beneficiaries with a history of non-fatal overdoses, use existing drug utilization review programs, very similar tools. They vary a little bit state by state, but the idea is to remediate any inappropriate prescribing for these beneficiaries. These are modest steps, Mr. Chairman. It would at least help us to identify these at-risk beneficiaries and inform prescribing physicians about the potential danger of further prescriptions, and so I would ask for a recorded vote.
Mr. Chairman.